Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining into Ibbaka's webinar this morning, wherever you are. AI monetization in 2025, unlocking revenue streams for the future. And we are more than happy and proud and just so excited that, Mark Stiving's joined us again. Last time we saw him was May last year. I think you, Stephen, you guys were doing the AI monetization Gen AI webinar. Michael, I think this is the third or fourth time now Stephen and you jumped in the webinar, including the one with Zuora. So yeah, we're really appreciative of you guys joining back with us. And I know it's taken up a bit of your guys' time, but thank you so much. And today, everyone, just to give you a little bit of a background context, last year in January 2024, Ibbaka released the first AI Monetization 2024 report, and we just released the second one in January this year, first week. And if you haven't downloaded that yet, or maybe you've only downloaded the last year's one, we have all the links at the end of this deck. Post-webinar, we're going to be sending the video recording. Once it's just edited, we'll cut all the fluff out at the beginning, and as well as the deck. So even if you join and you got to jump off, everyone here is going to get all of that. So don't you fret. And a little bit background context. We're just going to have this more of an open discussion, a little bit of background onto the research of the AI monetization report. A little bit further down the line, the rise of AI agents and where AI is right now in B2B SaaS, where people are putting that money into. Today we've got Michael Mansard from Zuora, Mark Stiving from Impact Pricing. I know Steve has done a bunch of podcasts with you, Mark, and CEO from Ibbaka, Stephen Forth. So take it away, gentlemen. And Stephen, I'm sharing, so you just let me know when I need to flip the slides. And everyone, QA is open.
Let's go to the next slide, Liam. So I'd like to repeat Liam's thanks to Michael and Mark for joining us today, and to everyone who's joining us online. We look forward to a really rigorous discussion. We're not looking for people to agree with us or to agree with each other. So let's open this up. I think this is one of the most important topics that anyone in B2B software, in AI, and in pricing can be discussing. To get us started, though, Michael, can you give us a quick introduction to yourself and your work?
Absolutely. First off, thanks for having me. I'm Michael. I'm based out of Paris. I'm the Principal Director of Subscription Strategy at Zuora, and I'm also the EMEA Chair of a think tank that's called the Subscribe Institute, which has about 1,500 members. I've worked on monetization across pretty much all industries with about 400 customers this past decade. So I'm pretty much a nerd when it comes to subscription and recurring business models. And that's why outside of Zuora, I'm also a startup business angel, but I'm also an advisory board member and a lecturer at INSEAD, the Executive MBA and Business School. And I created there the Subscription Business Model Bootcamp with Professor Ulaga. And we actually have a session next week. Quick word on Zuora in 2 sentences. It's the leading monetization suite, and it powers recurring growth with a mix of, I would call, customer-centric models, from usage-based all the way through subscriptions and pretty much everything in between. And we handle pricing, packaging, bidding, payments, revenue accounting, experiences, and much more. And we're used by companies such as Box, Philips, General Motors, New York Times, or Zoom that we're using today, by the way. That's me.
Thank you very much, Michael. Mark?
Thanks, Michael. So I'm Mark Stiving. I'm the host of the Impact Pricing podcast. If you're not listening to it, we'd love it if you join us and listen. Stephen is a frequent guest, and we're going to try to get Michael on one of these days soon as well. Besides that, all I ever do is study and teach pricing. I like helping companies figure out how they're going to capture more of the value they create, and so that's my entire life, is just playing with pricing.
Thanks, Mark. And I just want to endorse Impact Pricing's podcast is probably the single best way to keep up to date on pricing trends and hear from a wide range of different people with different opinions. So Stephen Forth, again, thank you. I lead Ibbaka. Ibbaka is a customer value management and value-based pricing software platform that we support with services. That is bringing to market some important innovations on how generative AI can be used to rapidly create, modify, and customize value models and use those to inform your pricing. I'm also a bit of a design geek, and I manage the almost too large LinkedIn design thinking community. Liam, let's go on to the next slide. So just quickly, what to expect today. We're going to start with a poll where we ask people where they are on their journey. We just want to look at a quick growth pattern in B2B AI, talk about the research that we've done, and then dive into a number of different discussions with Mark and Michael and people that are throwing us questions online. So let's start with the poll. Unfortunately, I can't vote, but I will tell you what I would have voted once the poll's closed. And Liam, let us know when enough people voted and we can move on.
Will do. Come on, 75%. I'm just going to call it 1, 2, 3.
Great. Could you go on to the next slide and share the poll results? Ooh, so we still got a lot of people who are curious, but we do have some people that have native AI solutions in the market or in development. And one person who has a second generation product in the market, which is fantastic. If you're willing and able to, it'd be great if you could identify yourself in the chat. And at some point, we'd love to get your lessons learned. As I would say, Ibbaka has Ibbaka itself, I would say, is somewhere between committed to a native AI B2B solution and are in development and have first generation product in market. Michael, can you comment on where Zuora is?
Same. So it depends what you call AI. We've had AI for quite a while. For example, on the payment side, for example, intelligent collection. Think of it, your customers sometimes don't pay you, and how do you prioritize those payments, and how do you get paid faster? How do you focus on the right battles? That's something we've been doing for a while. Another example that we have would be on the experience side. For example, we do have a capability that is reinforcement learning in order to better convert subscribers. For example, to decide when's the right moment on the media side to show a paywall. And of course, that's pretty big on the media side. So we do have these capabilities. On the LLM, we have Copilot capabilities. We're not a native player, but to your point, we've done AI for a bit. It's not front and center for us, but as time moves on, I think it's going to be front and center.
And Mark, I know you've done some experiments.
So I would have put myself in that first category maybe a month ago. And finally, after enough conversations with Steven, I said, okay, I'm going to commit to doing something. And so I am now actively working and committed to implementing an AI solution to something. So it is all your fault, Steven.
I'll take the blame if I also get some of the credit later on. So when we were talking about this presentation, Michael suggested that we include the slide that we're looking at right now, early growth patterns in B2B AI. And this is from previous research on net revenue retention. But one of the things that astonished many of us when we looked at the results of this research was that the highest performing companies on net revenue retention were using AI. That was not a huge surprise. What was the real surprise was that some of these companies combined relatively high churn, and I think most of us in B2B would consider 10% reasonably high churn. If I had a company With 10% churn, I would be concerned. But they overwhelmed that with huge expansion revenue. And we saw this in a number of AI companies in our net revenue retention research, this combination of relatively high churn and high expansion ratio revenue. Now, this may be a blip due to early adoption, or it may be a new pattern emerging. I don't know which it is, but I agree with Michael. This is an interesting and important thing to consider. But let's go on to the next slide, Liam. So just a little bit of background on the research. The research was conducted in November and December of last year, and it's only January of 2025, and I think things are already shifting again with new announcements from OpenAI and Microsoft, and the rapid progress that Salesforce is making with Agentforce and so on. But we got 336 companies responding to the survey, and we got a wide range of SaaS verticals, of which the largest was actually EdTech, which surprised me, as if you look at the survey data, EdTech are a bit of a laggard in many cases. But the other ones that we got a lot of responses were for MarTech, no surprise, data analytics, security, and supply chain management. And we did get a small number of sort of pure play machine learning into AI companies. The peak span, a wide range of revenue distributions here, but sort of concentrated in the 10 million to 200 million range. So this data does not really reflect the industry giants, the Oracles and IBMs and Salesforces and Microsofts and so on. It's really the innovation and growth and scaling part of the B2B SaaS and business AI markets. Next slide, Liam. So the key insights that we took away from the survey data, and please download and review the survey yourself to see if you agree with this. One is that customer success agents are the killer app for B2B AI. Even the people who were really skeptical about AI are adopting customer success agents. We saw 4 packaging and monetization patterns emerging, and really a lot of people's go-to-market strategies coalescing around one of these patterns. The patterns being agents, co-pilots, generators, and services software, and we'll discuss more about that in a moment. Both sustaining and disruptive applications are getting traction, and here we're talking about Clay Christensen's approach, where sustaining innovations are innovations that enhance value as it is currently being created and communicated, but they don't really create value in new ways. And disruptive innovations are new ways of creating value that have the potential of undermining existing industries. And finally, and this I think will surprise no one on this session, flexible pricing models are winning. This does not necessarily mean outcome-based pricing, although I'm a huge fan of outcome-based pricing. I think maybe it's a bit overhyped right now. There's probably more smoke than fire. But transferable credits and transferable tokens are a growing part of many people's pricing strategies. But I'll start here with Mark. What are your thoughts on these insights?
So my first question, I want to ask you, Stephen. Customer success seems to me like that's not the right answer, but I would agree 100% with your data if that said customer support. So I tend to think of customer success as a very proactive, who's not using my product, how do I get them to use my product better? And so I have a really hard time believing people are using agents for that. Whereas answering questions the customers call in with, 100% with you, right? I think that makes a ton of sense for agents.
I think you're probably right, and that this is probably better described in most cases as customer support. Although there are some applications that really do go beyond that and get to customer success. But I think your basic comment is probably right, Mark. Michael.
If I just step back on what I'm seeing from the markets, empirically, let's say I don't have such data. The top use case I've seen these past years that are at least piloted or monetized is customer service by far. And by the way, the market says it all. When you saw the first announcement in terms of innovative pricing, which means that to do innovative pricing, well, either you're crazy or you have enough data to back it up. And who was that? It was Intercom. They set the precedent. Then Zendesk move. Now you got Agentforce on the Salesforce side. So that, on its own, just this very specific horizontal solution just demonstrated to the market that it makes sense. The second one would be, I would say, almost at the same level, marketing solutions and IT. And in fact, when you step back, ITSM, solution management, is essentially very close to customer service when you think of it. So all these use cases are HR solutions, internal HR solutions, self-service type of things, where you typically have a query from someone that you need to respond to. It's usually time box, ring fenced, can be complex because you have to tap into maybe multiple systems. So these are the use cases that you see as the highest penetration, and those, by the way, that are the most monetized. And I would say what's the silver lining here is the fact that most of these processes, when they were processes that were known from a cost perspective. They were very well mapped in companies, and many of them were actually outsourced. There were a lot of companies outsourcing their customer service or support to large providers. So that explains why maybe it was easier to actually test AI on it, and of course for the other reasons I gave. And second, it was pretty easy to demonstrate a business case to the executive team, saying, "Look, right now it costs you, let's say, $10 to resolve a ticket. What if now it's 99 cents or $2?" And I think you have an immediate value, and of course the timing to solve a ticket, it doesn't take 3 years. It takes maybe 1-2 days, sometimes minutes. So there are also immediate ROI on the sum of resolutions and by resolution. So I think that explains why. Now, what I'd like to say is last year was really the year of horizontals, because everything I mentioned were horizontals, as in horizontal solutions. My feeling, by the way, when we do this same survey next year, Steven and Mark, is that probably this year is going to be the year of verticals. I wouldn't be surprised. We see still limited penetration of vertical AI, because probably vertical is going to be a sum of horizontals, and I think this is coming this year. And then we start feeling, at least on my end, I start feeling the thing. It's early signals, but it might be the year. Make sense?
Yes, but it brings a question forward for Michael and Mark. So, do you think that the different areas where BPO, or business process or outsourcing, got traction are going to be some of the first areas that move to the services software model and get replaced, and that the big BPO firms are going to need to move very quickly to AI-based solutions, or that they are at risk of disruption?
I think without a doubt, that's a positive answer. And the reason for that is, in order to outsource any business function, you have to have defined the business function. And once you can define a business function, then it's much more easier to automate it. When I think about what we're going through with AI, what we're doing right now is we're essentially automating knowledge work. And if you go back to the industrial age, what we were doing is we were automating labor, right? And so we're now going through the exact same thing with knowledge workers. If you can come up with a repetitive task, a well-definable task that we currently pay knowledge workers to do, we should be able to replicate that with AI.
And I just want to, so Dave Brown, who is, for those of you who don't know Dave's leading a very interesting healthcare innovation company. Dave has asked for some examples of BPO, and one of them is customer service, common thing outsourced. Many back office processes in banks and financial institutions are outsourced, and many HR, many parts of HR, benefits, payment processing, many parts of HR are also frequent candidates for BPO. And BPO stands for Business Process Outsourcing. So let's go on to the next slide, Liam. So from the data and from looking at who is being successful, we came up with a simple set of recommendations. One is be clear on your strategy. Are you trying to do sustaining innovation or disruptive innovation? Because these are very different strategies. They involve very different technology investments and go-to-market motions and ways of organizing your company. We would advocate that you use one of the core patterns because people have started to understand them. And I noticed the comment that, goodness gracious, can't we get rid of this term Copilot because Microsoft has sort of owned it. Fair comment, but I don't have a better term for these things that stand on your shoulder and help you as you go along with your work. And there are lots of them besides what Microsoft is doing. Generators, which is the sort of original use of generative AI to generate things. And Ibbaka is an example of a company built on the generator pattern, where one of the key things we generate are value models. And then services software, which we were just discussing in the business process outsourcing context, which is where I think a lot of us want to get. Third, pay attention to pricing. And I'm sure Michael and Mark will have comments on that. Focus on value. If you don't know how your solution is creating value for customers, you don't know how to build it, you don't know how to support it, you don't know how to price it, I'd argue you don't know much. And then one thing that we noticed is that the more innovative companies were making heavy use of open source models and were engaging with Hugging Face. For those of you who don't know Hugging Face, encourage you to go take a look. The last time I looked, there were more than 1 million different models on Hugging Face. This world is much broader and more engaged than just the big foundation model developers. But Michael, do you want to start us off with the discussion here?
Yeah, and I like your view on sustaining versus disruptive. And I would use a very simple analogy. So first off, of course, that only makes sense if you're an established player, because if you're a pure Gen AI player, there's not much question to ask. You're going to be disruptive by design, or there's a problem. The analogy I like to use is that it's not so far away from what we've known 2 decades ago when we moved from on-premise to SaaS, right? And what I would argue is you have to do both most of the time if you're an established player. You have to do sustaining and disruptive. Look at how most players did besides maybe Adobe, and even Adobe did it to some extent. They actually had a new SaaS model that was addressing new segments and new clients. And they had, from time to time, what I would call an on-premise subscription offer, right? Because when you do such an innovation, you're innovating on the revenue model side. In this case, you're going to move away from seat-based pricing to something else. We're going to discuss it after, I'm pretty sure, Steven, to something different, right? You're also innovating on the stack transformation because the technological stack to operate is different. And you're also changing the operating model. And I think we had a discussion with that, Steven, yesterday, about the fact that the margins are very different in Gen AI, typically 15 to 25 points lower as compared to SaaS. That's the gross profit margin. But then, one could claim that maybe your go-to-market approach can be very different. So long story short, if you're an established player, you have to play with constraints, and Gen AI is going to be margin dilutive. That's why probably you're going to have to be sustaining to help migrate your existing clients to tiptoe, and cover value with them. And at the same time, you want to be disruptive, probably with new offers, new proposals for net new clients, or maybe for some of the existing clients who wants to move. So it's going to be a progressive shift, that helps you unearth value from both sides. You have to understand the value, and your customers has to accept the value. And that's going to lead to iteration, continuous resegmentation, and of course, there's going to be use cases along the way. So my last comment would be, don't be a Siebel. Remember, Siebel, they actually created modern CRM. They actually created SaaS. We tend to forget that they were one of the first to create SaaS, but it was for them a byproduct for SMEs, and they didn't want to kill the golden goose, which was licensed business, big juicy license deals, and they never pushed hard. So what happened? They end up losing the market to Salesforce, and they got bought by Oracle. So my story to you is, if you go iterative, of course it may be hard to be disruptive 100%, but if you go iterative, move fast, and then really ask the hard question, which is AI my future revenue stack operating model? And if that's the case, push. And I think, Steven, what you described at what you're doing at Ibbaka, that is going in this direction, which is quite interesting.
Now, just before Mark jumps in here, I just want to note that, if you can disrupt yourself, someone else can disrupt you, and you're better off disrupting yourself than waiting for it to be done to you.
Yep.
But go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was going to pile on just in the exact same way, Stephen. If you take a look at those first two bullet points on this slide, it's implied there that you get to choose your strategy. But I'm going to say that I don't think you get to choose your strategy. You may get to choose your path, but in the end, your industry, your market conditions, there's a set of situations that says, here's the optimal answer for delivering this type of value to this type of customer. And it could be a disruptive innovation. It could be a sustaining innovation. It could be any one of those four core patterns that we've defined. And so I think what you really want to do is say, where do I think this is going to be, 5 years from now or 2 years from now? And what are the steps I need to take to get there?
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. Mark, do you want to just say a few words at this point about context-based pricing and some of the work that you're doing there?
Sure. So let me just say, I defined a phrase context-based pricing because I'm a huge fan of value-based pricing. And I always tried to define it in a broader way than most pricing people do. And every time I said this, that value-based pricing meant charge what a customer is willing to pay, all my pricing friends would say, no, that's not what it means. If you go look at what Nagel wrote originally, that's not what it means. And I agree completely. And so I just stepped back and I said, well, the optimal pricing strategy in any situation is charge what a customer is willing to pay. You can never do better than that. And so I ended up naming that context-driven pricing. And I do that because it's really all about what's the context the buyer is facing when they're making a purchase decision. Now, it turns out that in B2B, 90% of context-driven pricing is value-based pricing, right? So it's still all about value. But the thing I love about context-driven pricing is it then forces you to say to ourselves, hey, different buyers have different willingnesses to pay because they face different contexts. And by the way, we have the ability to influence somebody's willingness to pay. And so when we do that, now we're selling the value of our product. So I'm still a huge fan of value and value-based pricing, but I define context-driven pricing because it just forces us to think about the context in which someone's making a purchase decision.
And I would also argue or would like to explore how the use of generative AI can allow us to better define and understand context as we go forward. But let's go on to the next slide. I just do want to encourage people to go to Hugging Face again, though I'm a huge Hugging Face fan. But anyway, okay. So one of the things that Ibbaka does when we do these surveys is we go through and we cluster the data to see if there are any hidden patterns. And we have a number of ways that we do this with k-means and Layton and so on. For those who are interested, happy to have a sidebar conversation on that later. But when we ran the data from this survey, from these 330 plus companies through our clustering software, we found three basic groups who I labeled the skeptics, the sustainers, and the disruptors. Much to my surprise, skeptics are still the largest group at the end of 2024. And remember that this is a self-selected group of people taking this survey. You probably don't take a survey on AI monetization unless you are interested in AI and are doing product development. So if 44% of the people that took this survey are skeptics, the number of skeptics in the larger business audience is much larger. I would not be surprised if it was more like 80%. So there's still a lot of people who are dragging their feet on this. Sustainers were the next largest group. And these are the people like Ibbaka, like Zuora, who are investing in bringing AIs to market that are basically enhancing their current solutions. And then finally, about a fifth of the respondents were the true disruptors. And it's interesting to see where they were most concentrated. Obviously, the machine learning and AI, that's not surprising. Design. Design is a sector that I think we need to be talking about a lot more. Design platforms are rapidly coming to market that totally transform design and actually make, I believe, are going to make design part of something that the user owns, rather than just something that is decided for them beforehand. And then developer tools and communication tools, we're seeing a lot of disruptors in this space. But Michael and Mark, does this resonate with you? Is this a way that you would think of dividing, companies and people's thoughts about the market? And where do you sit in these clusters? Or actually, where do you sit as an individual, but also where does your organization sit? I desperately wish Ibbaka was in the disruptor group, but I have to admit we are not. Okay, Mark, I'm going to ask you spoke to this briefly earlier, but
I'll jump in. I have been a skeptic of AI for quite a while. So I was going to put myself in that category. But I would say lately I've been thinking more about the sustainers category and how I can use AI to help my clients figure out how their customers value products better. Right. And so the exercises that I typically do with my clients, I've started to do with AI in helping them. So it's definitely a sustaining innovation. There's no doubt. And so I'm thinking in the world of sustaining, but I want to take it just a step back. And as I think about the future of AI, I think that what's going to end up happening is people who build disruptive innovations, as in agents and standalone, and we're replacing people. I think what ends up happening is that takes all the profit out of AI. Because if you can do it, then someone else can do it. And now we're back to a plain competitive marketplace. And it's just the same thing as building a robot to automate a function in a factory, right? We're going to go to cost plus pricing as opposed to where's the value that I can add that someone else can't add. So I think people ought to be thinking, how do I stay in the sustainer category instead of moving to the disruptor category?
I agree. I would just add something, Mark, and maybe you would disagree, so feel free to disagree. I think many players, and that could be a good starting point. For me, a sustainer is someone that transforms SaaS into AI. Let me put it this way. In the early days of SaaS, you essentially create a system of record and a process. And very often you created a digital version of a PDF. I'm using the extreme version of that. And for me, a disruptor is someone who's not going to try to create a digital twin or the second version of a process, because the process could be broken. And do you really want to create a digital version of something broken? So that's where I agree with you. The risk with the robots is that you simulate a human behavior through a digital process that is supposed to be automatic, right? And improving. And I think the real disruptors would be individuals and companies who are going to reinvent the thing, right? So they would go from the outcome and work backward to see what's the best way to build the outcome. And right now, a lot of Copilot and other things are just quick fixes in a good way, right? It's a good thing. I really think the innovation would come by completely rethinking the actual, or even thinking about a different outcome. So we'll see about, and that's what, in my view, when anchoring back to pricing, that's what I think is going to completely revolutionize pricing, and that's why I think that's going to drive an explosion of price metrics. We've been stuck, and we've discussed that a lot. We've been stuck in the seats user paradigm for 50 years, roughly. Even on license, you still had license per user. And the fact that you're going to rethink completely the value and the outcome, and you could imagine a new outcome with your clients, is going to drive very distinctive packaging model and very distinctive metrics. So think of companies like Harvey AI, think of companies like Hippocratic AI on health, on law. If they really reimagine what law is about, that could be game changer. And to your point, Steve, Mark and Steven, in one way, it could be just a unit of work type of pricing, and you just try to demonstrate that you're cheaper than the human equivalent and you can work 24/7. Or you're going to show that you can do something dramatically different and drive dramatically different outcomes. And in that case, you won't be in cost plus, but you're going to be into value based. So I agree with you, Mark. And we don't yet know how that looks like, but companies that are not able to really understand the value and the outcome are really going to be left behind.
So I want to, by the way, I agree with everything you said there, Michael, but I want to ask this question to both you and Steven. If you can find a really innovative solution to delivering the value to a client or solving their problem in a very different way, and you can do that with AI, haven't you essentially created a BPO? And once you've done that, someone else can copy it. And now all we're doing is we're automating a function and we're driving it down to cost again.
Yes.
That's a super interesting question, Mark, and I'm going to suggest we do a podcast on that. I don't think it's inevitable that that's the case. I think there are a lot of fences that one can establish in these AI-driven solutions. But I think that it's a big question. So let's call that one out, and I'll put some time on your calendar for us to go into it deep on a podcast because I think it's a bit more complex than that. Liam, let's go on, and I think the next poll is next. And this is the question here is about your company, not you personally, but your company. Because as I said, at Ibbaka, I would regard myself as a disruptor, but our business strategy today is as a sustainer.
While we're waiting, Steven, can I toss out one more comment on this whole, are we building a commodity out of a BPO? And
for sure.
Here would be another thought. Let's assume that you figured out how to automate a salesperson, right? So I can do all of those functions. I'm currently on Salesforce. They've done a fantastic job. Why can't someone build an AI that's going to make my switching costs really close to zero? And so now I can take all of the data that I had in Salesforce and move it to my new CRM with almost no switching costs.
I think that's happening. And I think one can even show that AIs are replacing integration.
Yep.
There's a use case where AIs approach integration. I think the sort of counter I'd like to put out there, though, Mark, is it's also it's not just sellers who are moving to AIs and AI SDRs. It's also buyers. Buyers are increasingly using AIs in order to make buying decisions. So, is your AI seller going to be good at selling to an AI buyer?
Man, there goes my job.
Yeah. So it's great. So it's interesting. So this the people that chose to attend this webinar and answer this poll are much more skewed towards sustainers. It's still about the same number of disruptors, but I guess that the skeptics were less willing to invest their time and energy in a webinar. So for all of those whose companies are in sustainer, Mark thinks you're doing the right thing.
He does.
But let's go on. I'd like to spend a little bit of time, talking about the rise of agents. There's been an awful lot of talk about agents from the latter part of 2024, especially with Salesforce's Agentforce announcement. And many companies that we're aware of are developing and commercializing agents. So I thought we could start to wind up here with a little bit of discussion about the rise of agents. And this little sketch that we have on the left here comes from the report, and it's really suggesting that generators are the underlying functionality, and in some cases they are the product. But generators are also being used to create copilots. Forgive my use of the term, but until I have a better one, I'm going to keep on calling them copilots, and agents. And the difference between an agent and a copilot is an agent is actually making decisions, whereas a copilot is being used to support decisions. And then, as we were discussing earlier, in some cases, a combination of agents and generators and copilots are being woven together to support services software. But Michael and Mark, do you think that 2025 is going to be the year of agents? And how do you think people are going to be approaching the pricing of agents? So why don't we have Michael start on this?
So I don't think it's a very hard prediction. I'm quite convinced that it's the year of agents. And I mentioned also I think it's going to be the year of at least the explosion of vertical AIs, which could be in the forms of agents. At the end of the day, the copilots are useful, but they don't deliver full value. What delivers full value, and we have evidence of that, by the way. Happy to discuss in the future. I need to get some data published, but we have examples where by leaving the computer make decisions in customer acquisition, for example, it does a better job than a human and a better job than rules. So even if you have AI with rules, it never works as well as if you let an agent, with reinforced learning conversion. So one of my colleagues and I, Jonathan from Zuora, we spoke about that. We're probably going to share data around that. It's quite interesting. So first off, why is it going to be the year of agents? Not because it's fancy, but because it can work very effectively, right? So that's really one first-hand experience I have, and also it prevents you, as simple as it sounds, not to have to manage a workflow on your own. So that sounds very basic. So it's a natural extension of what we've known from AI, and a lot of people were actually building agent without knowing it by just creating semi-manual workflows, with different services stitched to one another. So pretty convinced about that. The question and I let Mark comment as well, but the question I have back at you, Stephen, and to the audience is interesting, which is, for each of these, especially for agent and service as a software, what is then the right go-to-market? What's the right motion, right? Is it direct? Is it partner-led? Is it paid? Is it product-led? Is it AI-led growth? We discussed that yesterday. And why am I mentioning that? You mentioned earlier BPOs. BPOs, of course, service as a software is a direct, and Mark, I think you can have made it clear, it's a direct threat to a BPO player if you start providing a solution that does the job automatically. Now, can the BPO become actually a player in that space and create their own service as a software solution? Do they partner? Do they have to acquire through M&A? So I think that's going to be quite an interesting year to discuss what is going to be the right go-to-market approach vis-a-vis the four packages archetypes you've defined, Stephen, on this one.
So I would say, Stephen, first off, I dearly love this picture. I think this is a really nice picture to describe what's going on. And as I said earlier, I think that industries have a specific place that they belong, that they're going to go. And if we assume for a second, any industry that's going to go service a software, it has to go through the agent, and it probably also has to go through the copilot phase, but it has to go through the agent phase. And so it seems to me that agents are a much more effective and efficient way to deliver an outcome than having a copilot. And so we're going to see more and more people going to agents just because it's more cost effective. It's more efficient to run the company that way, or to run any given function that way. So, and it's a stepping stone into SaaS if we're going to get to SaaS there. So I think without a doubt, we're going to see tons of agents. And from a pricing perspective, I'm going to give you my perspective on pricing for just a second, and I'll save a little bit of it for the next one. And that is, I think there's really two ways to do pricing, right? We do cost plus pricing or we do value pricing. That's it, right? There really isn't another way to do that. And as soon as you go from generators, by the way, the only way we do generator pricing is cost plus pricing somehow. And as soon as we go to agents, we suddenly have a way to define what's the value we're delivering to a customer. Now, there are lots of different ways, there are lots of different value metrics we could measure, lots of different pricing metrics we could use, but we have the ability to correlate that with the value we're delivering because it's actually a solution to a problem. It's not a platform that solves many, many, many different problems for many, many, many different people like generators do.
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things about agents, right, is that agents make autonomous decisions. It's part of the definition of an agent. So there is some speculation that this ability of an agent to make a decision makes agents the best place to start thinking about outcome-based pricing. What do you guys think of that that position? Are agents the natural place to introduce outcome-based pricing?
So yes, kind of. First off, here's the answer is I wish every pricing problem was priced with outcome-based pricing. Every single one. Now, it turns out that it's just not possible in so many different ways. And so we don't do outcome-based pricing. If there's a way that we could tie agents' performance to outcome and price based on outcome, I'd be hugely thrilled. But I'm also pretty confident that just like we can't price every product based on outcome, we're not going to be able to price every agent based on outcome. And so there's going to be other pricing metrics that we end up using. But I'm with you. I hope that we get closer and closer to outcomes.
I'm 100%. The key questions are, can I ask for this outcome? And can I demonstrate a straight line between the agent and the outcome? And by the way, and even if I can, is there acceptance on the customer side? Because sometimes it seems like a good idea, but it can create more sales frictions and actually more frictions at renewal. Because then, of course, it's all rosy when you sign, but then the client would always claim that you didn't really deliver this. So with the agents, there's a bit more proof than, say, other delivery models. Because it's something different than saying I'm happy to share 20% of the outcome with you, but then when you send the invoice, you press the button. I can tell you, customers tend to complain for some reason, right? There's always a good reason not to pay. So let me give an example. Decagon, which is also a customer platform, similarly to Zendesk and Intercom, they actually provide the two models. They provide a model per resolution, but they also have a model per conversation. And that's good, right? Because maybe I'm just making this up, but maybe some clients who are very mature, who have a very significant cost center when it comes to customer support, have maturity, control their cost, and are able to commit to some extent to resolutions. But maybe some others who have doubts, they would prefer per conversations versus resolution. So again, I don't think it's desirable to always go toward outcomes. I think it takes two to tango. So at the end of the day, if the customer is not ready as well to move to outcomes, even though it seems like a good idea, it might not be a good idea. So it's a function of maturity. It's a function of capability. It's a function of desirability. But my view is you're going to end up with many pricing models, but that's your own problem. You may have 5, 6, 7 metrics. You will always show one to your clients because you've qualified well enough and you understand exactly what would resonate with the buyer in front of you. So I think it's going to coexist. Short version, Stephen, Mark.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark, and then we'll move to the next slide.
So I noticed that you just commented on Tim's comment, but it actually prompted a really important thought, and that is, how are we going to define outcome?
Yep.
Because if we wanted to find an outcome as how many FTEs did I replace, I think we can do a decent job at outcome-based pricing with agents. But if we wanted to find outcome based on the actual value we're delivering to the end customer, then we go back to what Michael and I just talked about.
Yeah. Liam can go to the next slide. And just as Liam's doing that, our experience is that you can only do outcome-based pricing if buyer and seller can agree on the outcome, which sounds easy, but often is not. If they can agree on the attribution of what led to the outcome, which I think is actually a solvable problem with causal machine learning. And finally, if the outcomes have a degree of predictability, because as we all know that when you're pricing something, unpredictable pricing causes a lot of angst and uncertainty for both buyer and seller. So it's only when those three conditions can be met that you can really move to outcome-based pricing. And that today is in a very small minority of the cases. So I'm just going to go through this quickly so we can have a little bit of a wrap up. So our suggestion is map out a strategy, make it very clear to everyone on the team and to the markets, whether you are attempting to do sustaining or disruptive innovation. Have a clear development approach as to whether you are extending or adding or embedding or replacing or replatforming using AI. Pick one of the four patterns because people are becoming accustomed to them and understand them and are willing to pay for these patterns. Understand value. Can't emphasize that enough. And then it's time for all of us to start exploring an AI-led growth go-to-market motion, but that is probably the subject of a future conversation. And let's go on to the next slide, Liam. So we don't have a huge amount of time left. I'm just going to preempt this, guys, because there was a very important question about token-based pricing, which we did not address. I think a lot of the foundation models have token-based pricing because they are broad, general applications. The really interesting thing is going to become as reasoning models get more adoption. So OpenAI is leading the push into reasoning models with O1, and O3 will be delivered in this quarter. It will begin to become available. OpenAI not only prices input and output tokens, it also prices the reasoning tokens that it generates when it's using a reasoning process, as it does in O1 and O3. And I recently saw some interesting data that depending on the complexity of what you're doing, the reasoning tokens, which you're paying for, in which you have no control over or visibility into, can be as much as 70% of the total number of tokens. So this is, it's going to be very interesting to watch this evolve. I'm just going to ask Michael and Mark to close this off with a very short sentence, and we will pick up the other questions that arised in the comments in blog posts and on Mark's podcast. But start with Mark, and we'll give Michael the last word.
Really quick sentence. If you hate cost plus pricing, you should hate token-based pricing.
I'm with you. The only thing I would add is even when we say token or we say per conversation, it's not as easy as it sounds because very often it requires a commitment and there's an overage, let's say 2.50 cents on Salesforce, while they claim $2. So most of these models are also committed models. So it's a lot more complex than it looks on the surface. So yeah, do your due diligence, and yeah, the models are not as simple or straightforward as we think, and they tend to pile up reasoning tokens, and so on. So yeah, be careful, watch out.
Liam, can you take us home?
Yeah, I mean, we're a minute or two out. I see Dave has a couple of questions, but I think just because we're wrapping up in literally 1 minute, Dave will answer those in a blog, and Niati as well. We will send everyone a recording. So just want to say thanks so much to everyone. With a deck that we'll be sending out to everyone. We do have the panel here, which is like our upcoming masterclasses and downloads. And just want to say thanks so much for everyone for joining. And Michael, I know it's late in Paris for you. Thanks for accommodating this webinar and helping out again. And same to you, too, Mark. All righty. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Great
everyone,
one.
for listening and your comments.
Bye now.